Let's say we go back 100 years to like the early 1920s and 30s. Everybody was a prepper, not because they were preppers. It was just their way of life. Conserving meats in, root cellars and canning food. That was a way of life, and we've kind of lost it. So I personally believe that people should be prepared. You should be able to support yourself over a period of time, as well as support your community, maybe your neighbors on your left or right or whoever's behind you. You should know how to do these things.
Let me ask you this. First, I saw your biopic, bro. You are the baddest looking dude ever. Like you look like, that dude. That if the world was ending and apocalypse happened here, right?
Yeah.
This is the guy that you wanna be in the camp with, right?
Right on.
So you started out in the Marines, right? I mean, take me back there. So how did you end up in the Marines, and what did you do for the Marines, and how long were you there for?
So I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1999. I kind of graduated high school in 98, did like a short stint in college, and was like, this is possibly the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life. So kind of left school, joined the Corps, and went through the whole process, boot camp, School of Infantry, and that's where I was infantryman. I was actually a machine gunner, so I would carry around like a 50-pound, 60-pound machine gun with tripods and ammo, and put them into action, and kind of do what you need to do.
Right,
if you hear my dog over here losing her mind, that's just because no one's giving her attention. But
that's okay. Well, what kind of dog, by the way?
So, hey, she's a 7-month-old Great Pyrenees, and she's like almost 100 pounds. Stop. She's crazy. She's absolutely crazy.
Well,
but
she's also at that age, right? She's like, play with me, play with me, play with me.
She is. And in this room, there's nothing but like skulls and bones. So she just sniffs around, wants to eat everything. But she's coming along. But so my first like stint in the Marine Corps, as an infantryman, I kind of like transitioned into the schooling aspect of it, where I was a formal military instructor, and I taught people how to jump out of helos as far as spy rigging, fast roping, and rappelling. And then I taught a squad leader, a leadership course to a lot of young Marines on how to essentially become a leader and lead by example, and be that Marine that is kind of setting the example for his peers, his seniors, as well as his subordinates.
Right.
And then from there, I kind of transitioned into a different job. I kind of realized, and I was married at the time, that the infantry was going to kind of be a pathway, and I kind of wanted a little bit of a change. And I think sometimes in life and sometimes in the military, you kind of get focused on this one thing, and that's what you're going to do for the next 20, 30 years. And for me, I kind of got interested in the counterintelligence, human intelligence field. And I went through a recruitment process, went through a couple select schools, and then found myself as a counterintelligence agent, deployed to all these different places, where essentially I would embed with local population, and through the act of human intelligence, person to person, employing interpersonal skills and rapport, and all these different kind of human dynamics we need to understand. I would use them as a source of information, and then they would use me essentially as a source of, security, a source of financial means, a source of, simple things like, clean water or building materials. Mm-hmm. And through those relationships, our job was essentially to deny, detect, and deceive foreign entities, combat sort of enemies, terrorism, espionage, sabotage, and subversion through the use of human intelligence.
Wow. So, and where was this? Like, what region were you in, or what part of the world was this happening?
Yeah. So this was in Iraq a couple times, the Philippines. I did some operations stateside under NCIS, some operations in Japan, just pretty much all around everywhere where there was a mission set. You could find yourself deployed with just you and one other guy, like you and your partner, a pistol shoved down your pants, some board shorts and flip-flops, and you're meeting with local liaisons about potential threats in the area and what are the safe areas to go. And there's a lot of requirements you would kind of have to explore and kind of investigate, if you will. But it was one of those jobs where it required kind of, that independent operator, a different level of kind of thinking and focusing and really diving into that human dynamic on how I can plant myself in this tribal community, in this, community in a city, become part of it, and then ultimately get them to trust me, as well as, myself trusting them through various means and tactics and techniques and methods and whatnot.
And did they know that this was part of like the Marines and intel? Because I mean, for the audience, by the way, like, the question that I want to ask is like, how well do you camouflage in? There's certain people that like you could just put them in from an intelligence standpoint anywhere in the world, and they're just they blend, right? You look like a massive dude. we could see from like a mile down the road. So
yeah. I mean, like, operating in the Philippines as a 6'2", white guy with tattoos, you definitely stick out. But some of the ways we would operate in an overt capacity, meaning you are who you are. You are true rank, true name, true affiliation, but your mission or the things that you're there doing aren't quite necessarily, provided. You're not saying, hey, I'm here to, gain information from you guys through forms of elicitation or direct questioning. I'm here essentially to work as a liaison with you. And then through that established relationship, through that overt capacity, I'm looking to, extract information through a series of questioning and processes and a lot of, analysis back and forth. Now, the other side of that is you can operate in more of a clandestine manner where you are, there should be a little delineation between like overt, clandestine, and covert. We use the word covert a lot these days, but covert is really the masking of the host nation entity and actually the mission set at hand. So when the news and media says this covert action is taking place, well, nobody should actually know it's a covert action for it to be covert. Clandestine is the means of concealing a relationship between two people. So that's where you employ a lot of tradecraft to mask that face-to-face or that phone conversation. So nobody truly knows that you two are, communicating or extracting and exchanging information. So most of the times you're in overt, and then kind of a gray area in between where you might use an alias, but you're not ever really going to reveal your real name. So like downrange in a hostile environment like Iraq or Afghanistan, Northern Africa, whatever the case may be, I'm not going to provide all of my personal information. They might know I'm affiliated with the DOD and I'm affiliated with the Marine Corps, but they don't know all the, the beans and bullets and band-aids of it, if you will. Because if you think of like the CIA is a clandestine entity that covers a lot of different areas. Essentially, the CI Humit field in the Marine Corps is the DOD's version of the CIA.
Right.
So I did that.
Okay. Crazy.
Yeah.
And again, how long were you in did you do this for the Marines?
I did 12 years in the Marine Corps. And then I got out in 2011 and started my own business and kind of going down a different pathway, really based on some of my experiences that I came across in the Corps, as well as all the things that I would do in my youth as a kid, hunting and fishing and living in teepees and, sleeping outside for days on end. So I was like,
this was even before the Marines and stuff. You were outdoors, wilderness, Tarzaning from tree to tree. So by the way, I'm a complete prepper. So we're gonna get into into a sec, right? Because I got a lot of questions to ask, right?
No worries.
Okay, but before we go there, so you hear a lot of this, like Marines and military personnel and SEALs. They come out of service, and by the way, thank you for your service.
Appreciate
it. Did you have a difficult time coming into civilian life? What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, I would say the transition was it was difficult at times because you're going from an environment that's high paced, the op tempo. You're deploying all the time. Your overall pattern of life, when you're in that environment, is working to negate a threat or to stop this or to train for some sort of, kinetic or some sort of, mutua, which is like a military operation other than war. You're always training and mentally preparing yourself for these things. And the day you get out, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a completely different world, it can be, a little overwhelming. It can cause, a lot of guys, a lot of stress. They can turn to drugs, they can turn to alcohol and all these other different outlets. And I think for me personally, I knew kind of where my happy place was. I knew the things that I enjoyed prior to the military, because I had those things. I had, backpacking and hiking and rock climbing and skiing. And I knew if I was going to be leaving one world that completely consumed my everything, I was going to have to find that way to kind of reconnect to the things that brought me peace and the things that brought me a lot of joy and adventure when I was, a teenager, as well as, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. So yes, there's a transition. And, when I transitioned out, I found myself in Maryland, and that's not the place that I wanted to be.
Right.
So, I quickly found
it's very government, right? And military, and like, you kind of naturally end up, a lot of people end up working in some agency in Maryland, but I could see where that might have been tense or difficult for you to wake up and be like, what the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming when it's like complete polar opposites. There is a government presence there, but and when I got out, that's kind of what I did. I was doing what I was doing in the military, but on kind of the civilian side for a short period. And after a while, I was like, this is not me. I don't want to always be thinking about, this threat or that potential, harm over here or some sort of event going on overseas. I'm like, I don't want to not acknowledge those things, but at a certain point, I can only impact so much. When I was directly involved in the military, my impact was felt. I could deploy downrange and actually hold that impact on a small scale as well as a larger scale. And when you get out, you still feel like you want to be able to do that, but you have to quickly realize, all right, how can I impact that community? How can I support them? But I need to slowly kind of just step away and say, I'm no longer downrange. I'm no longer fighting that fight or collecting intel or doing these sort of things. So what is my new role? What is my position? What is that outlet, if you will? And for me, it's always been the outdoors, and that's kind of where I went.
Amazing. So what was the business? The business was adventuring? Was it teaching? Was it taking people out on excursions?
Yeah. So I run a kind of wilderness self-reliance school called Paleo Tracks. And essentially I bring people out in the backcountry for, 1 day, 3 days, 5, 10, 20 days. And I kind of customize my offerings based on those individuals. If somebody's looking to kind of experience just an overall adventure, they want to get out there and catch fish with their hands and eat wild plants and sleep under the stars, that's what we do. If someone's looking, let's say a father has 3 daughters and he's a single dad, and he wants to bring his daughters camping, he wants to kind of prepare himself. What are some of the things I could encounter? What's some best habits and practices and hacks, if you will, that I can bring my daughters out there and know that I can keep them safe. So I cater all of those courses to each and every single client, because I'm not a fan of a blanket course, because everybody's different. I like to give them a little bit of an offering. So like recently, about a week ago, I was down in the Chihuahua Desert for 10 days with a college student that wanted to go out and essentially build everything that we would need to survive for a chunk of change. And then we walked into these canyons and trapped rats and mice and made stone tools and ate all sorts of food, slept under the stars and hunted with rabbit sticks, and just ultimately lived that sort of, primitive hunter-gatherer sort of caveman kind of life. And
right.
We did it, it's a good time. So
amazing. And when you're taking people out there, I mean, what do you see the civilian having issue with? So they take you out to the wilderness. One wants to build fire, eat a rat, decide which berries. Like sometimes it's a little. People have these romantic ideas of how cool would this be, and they get out there, and it's like, ooh, hold on. So, like, what do you see happening to people out there? What are some of those things that mess them up?
Yeah, I think some of the issues people face is the exposure to the elements. A lot of people are inside. They can run from their house to their car, turn on the heat, and kind of go about their business. But I think when people are extremely cold or when they're hot, they really start to kind of shut down. Their body is not conditioned for that sort of extreme, if you will. Food is always another issue. People like eat their 3 square meals a day and maybe have some snacks in between, coffee. And, that can be a little overwhelming. And I kind of show different ways to kind of overcome that, whether it's kind of a direct fasting or an indirect fasting. How can we occupy our minds? What can we always do to improve our situation? But I'd say between the food and just the overall, extremes of temperatures. You lay that over getting a good night's sleep. People have some rough times, but that's one of the things of being, and building your self-reliance is really finding out, all right, how did I sleep tonight? I slept horrible. What's one thing I can do to make it better? How can I make last night a little bit better? And then you start brainstorming. Before you know it, people that have maybe camped 2 or 3 times in their entire life are building these huge shelters and reinforcing the wind and finding ways to stay warm that maybe I didn't even consider. They're just, ultimately creating these solutions in their head. And I tell a lot of people that I come across in these classes and just in life, I always tell them creativity is your number one survival skill. Everything you see, everything that exists in this world, we've created, and everything can come from that natural environment. So for a lot of these folks, they understand the value of a pine branch, a pine bough, and how warm it can keep you if you start to layer them and stack them and then put a couple up on top of you. They're like, you know what? I slept really good last night, and even in this last adventure where I brought this college student out into the desert, we built a nice big long fire. We dug a pit, put a fire down in it about 6 feet long, let it burn for about an hour, laid it with some rocks. So all those rocks heated up, pushed a bunch of sand on the coal and the hot rocks, and then he slept right on top of that and had a heated bed the entire night, to the point where he was waking up, I think around 3 o'clock, where he had to shed a layer because he was, it was that warm. So it's those sort of, problem solving, that creative process that I think people really resonate with. And then once they realize that they're fully capable, anything's possible.
So what are the top sort of survival techniques or lessons that, like, if there's a lot, I'm sure, right? I mean, you've got a lifetime of this stuff, but for the everyday sort of vanilla person that they're going out, what would be some fundamentals that, like, don't even begin to think about doing this unless these basics are in place? What would they be? Making a fire, knowing how to hunt?
Yeah, I think navigation is probably one of the first ones to avoid getting lost. You know what I mean? Yeah. If you're going out and you're going to walk a 10-mile trail, you should have some means of navigating that trail, because anyone that's ever been hiking knows that sometimes one single trail splits off into 4, and that's how people can get lost pretty easy. So having a good sense of navigation, a map, even a compass, and knowing how to work all of those things properly. I'm not talking about like a phone GPS, good old-fashioned map and compass. That can save you a lot of heartache in the event that you get lost. Prior to that, I would just let somebody know where you're going. Hey, right, I'm going out here for the next, day. If you don't hear from me in 2 days, you might want to, contact some authorities. Once you've kind of moved beyond that and it really falls into, okay, I'm lost, whatever the case may be, I think a good sense of first aid, because a lot of survival situations only extend once you run into a brick wall, and that brick wall can be an injury, and that brick wall can be getting lost. No one's just going to, go out and be like, now I'm surviving. I mean, a lot of people that practice survival and bushcraft and primitive skills, all that is self-induced. They're purposely going out there to test their skills. Like somebody would go to the gym, or, a football team has a football practice. They're going out and practicing. But all of those things leading up to that moment where you have to employ those skills, navigation, first aid. Because if you twist an ankle and you can't walk out, that's a problem. If you twist an ankle and know how to give yourself a field dressing, wrap that ankle so maybe you can stumble out, you've now eliminated an extended stay in the bush. Once we go past, navigation and injuries, shelter is probably the most important, because any exposure to an extended period of weather, whether it's heat, whether it's cool temps, wind, snow, rain, you name it, that's going to wind up killing you quicker than anything, because your body can only take so much. Imagine if you've spent an entire day walking in the snow, you're hot, you're sweaty, all of a sudden you get turned around, you don't know where you're at, and you're like, temps are dropping, I'm soaking wet, I need to find a place where I can either take my clothes off, get inside of something, shield the wind, shield the temps, get warm, or I need to find something that can generate some more body heat and potentially drop my clothes. But I think it slowly goes into that shelter, and then definitely some water. Yeah. Water is key, because we all...
That's what I was going to say, water, right? That's the big one, right? Like, how do we know which is clean water? What do we do if we don't have, a fire to boil water? So how do we contend with that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to water, it's water and shelter kind of play. So if I'm in a desert environment or a tropical environment, they kind of ebb and flow with which one takes priority. But when it comes to water, we all need it. And I recommend for the weekend warrior, the average Joe, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of water bottles that come with their own water filtration system. You can scoop up dirty water, put the cap on, give it a drink. For me, I've gotten into the habit and the custom over the years of locating springs and drinking straight from the source, sopping up the dew from morning leaves and wringing that into my mouth. Rain is always a free drink. Snow can be, melted in various ways. There's a lot of ways that you can have, I always call it direct consumption water, something I don't need to do anything to. I don't need to boil it, don't need to process it. Those do exist, but if you're not familiar with those, definitely a, kind of filter in the bottle sort of thing. That's going to really be your best bet, because you can take the dirtiest, cap it, squeeze it, start chugging it down. You can be good.
Yeah. I've got one of those filter straws, right? Like part of my prepping kit.
Life straws.
Life straws. Exactly. So interesting. Scooping dew. I've never thought of that, but it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah,
I think
it's clean.
It's clean water, right? Now you just scoop it like a cup or a bottle.
No, you can just take a handkerchief or a t-shirt and just kind of like you're cleaning off the dew. And then that rag or that shirt gets kind of wet. You can just wring it into your mouth or wring it into a cup. You might have a little bit of sweat in there or dirt in there, but I mean,
that's yours.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone as far as once you see, dew settled on the leaves, to just go over and, slurp it up. You just, you got to know some poisonous plants and things that could potentially harm you. But, morning, dew is nice and cool. It's refreshing. The sun's not out, because eventually it's going to get, evaporated. So you might as well take advantage of it.
Right. Very cool. So water, super important. Shelter. What about security? You're going to run into, the bear. What do you do if you run into a bear?
Yeah, I mean,
although I think if a bear ran into you, the bear would take off, by the way.
Yeah, I think a lot of the encounters that people come across with bears and, mountain lions, they're so limited. And most of the time, if you stumble upon something and you surprise it, that's when that encounter is really going to happen. But a bear is going to hear you and smell you miles away. And if it wants nothing to do with you because it's barking dogs or chit-chatting or whatever, it's just going to take off. It's really the same thing with a lot of your big cats in North America, your mountain lions and your, bobcats, things to that extent. They're not really going to mess with you. A lot of people carry firearms. I never carry a firearm with me when I go into the bush. I always just kind of say, all right, what do I know about this given time and place? Is it, the rut mating season? Is it the calving season? There's a lot of young out there. Is it the last push before, winter hits and they're really hungry, scavenging for whatever they can? And they use that environment and kind of say, all right, where are these animals likely to be? Because wherever they are, I'm going to try to avoid those areas. So in Colorado, moose are a big threat. Alaska, moose, up in Montana, you have grizzly bears. So if you kind of take in those local populations of threats and what they could potentially do for you, you just mitigate those risks and say, all right, I'm not going to go to this area because this is where all of the bears are coming out of hibernation. They're going to be super hungry, a little kind of, lackadaisical as they're coming out of hibernation, but eventually that hunger is going to strike and they're going to go after everything and anything. Yeah. I think if it has to come down to it, and you've got to carry something, and you're in bear country, a bear bell just to give warning, some sort of bear spray. And if you don't feel comfortable with those, then a firearm would probably suit you well if you've got the training and everything.
Right. Cool. So that makes sense. That sort of being super aware of that time, and you really broke it down, which is like, hey, it's the calf season when there's young and mama's going to be a little protective versus, hey, winter's coming, fall, and they're trying to sort of fatten up. And at that point, it's like, let's just eat anything. Moose. Why are moose dangerous? I mean, I think of a moose, I think of more I think the worst thing is you drive in a car and you hit a moose, like the most dangerous, right? But what you're saying is like, I'm assuming these things can be pretty aggressive.
Yeah. A cow moose with her young can be very aggressive. I mean, you can be walking through a patch of alders, you could be walking anywhere, and they could hear you coming, but if you continue to get it close, that mom moose will charge you. I've seen countless bull moose out in certain environments. And if you're too close, I mean, just as, an animal, it's going to stand its ground and try to drive you off. But a mom moose with, a calf, whether it's, a couple months old or relatively new, it's gonna come after you, and you gotta find yourself some sort of shelter to dodge and duck into some trees where it can't get itself into. But there's quite a few, encounters with moose that you'll find that people have actually come across where they're just walking on a trail, and next thing you know, they come around a bend and there's a mom moose there with its calf. If she starts walking towards you, you just kind of move to an area that gives you a little bit of protection as trees and bushes and things like that, because they don't want to exert a lot of energy, and she doesn't really want to isolate her calf for too long, but she will do what she has to do just to drive you away and kind of give you that, hey, don't mess with me sort of thing.
Yeah. I grew up in South Africa, and, you go on a lot of these safaris and stuff, and people love the hippos, right? And hippos are extremely fast and dangerous. I got a friend, actually, he was taking a group out, also actually South African military, and he ended up being an adventurer and taking people out on excursions and stuff. And they were out on a boat one day and in hippo territory, and hippo came up and knocked the boat, and one of the people fell out of the boat. And this guy jumped into the river. All right. Now he lost his arm. He was punctured something like 52 times. But, saved the guy and ended up getting mauled by this hippo. And he's written a book and he's a speaker on it. And it's an incredible story. But I mean, the mindset to be able to do that. And that's what I'm really sort of interested with you, man. Like this mind that you have, this capacity to go out and handle these things. How important do you think this is as a skill set for everyone? And I just answered my own question. I mean, it's a super important skill set for kids. Do you teach your kids this? I know you have two sons, so like have you run them through the Donny Dust survival training and the paleo guide?
I mean, my two boys have been kind of exposed to all this through their life, so it's nothing out of the ordinary. Like, we don't sit down and say, hey, today is Tuesday, it's flint napping night, or this day, or anything like that. They've just always been a part of it. So kind of through that, osmosis of exposure, they've learned. So, I mean, this last summer, we butchered a bison on the back porch, cutting out the cuts of meat, and just, because that's what we've been eating most of the winter. So they just know a lot of these things. But I do teach a lot of kids in various, forms, whether it's a homeschooling group or a scouts group or just a community kind of coming together to teach kids. And it's one, kids are always curious, like how you can make a fire, how you can do this. And two, they actually, I think, kind of have this innate draw to it where they're like, this feels right. This feels normal. Like, I know this is somewhere in my history. And just like all kids, they'll run outside, they'll grab a stick, pretend it's a spear, and they'll be like, oh, I want to sharpen it and rub it up against something. It's kind of like an early phase of problem solving and really building into kind of their own personal self-reliance of, hey, if you go hiking out in the woods and you get separated from your folks, what should you do? And they just kind of simply think about that process. But, most of the kids I come across are really into the outdoors, or they're really curious about, tanning hides or building stone tools, and they do enjoy it. And I always just try to promote it. Like, look, I'm 43 years old. I've got a wall of stuff behind me. I've written a couple books, been on some TV shows and all this sort of stuff. So when someone says you can't do this, it's not a hobby, like, you can do it. I'm that proof.
I'm doing it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked on movie sets as a technical consultant. I've done a lot of different things because of my interests that really started when I was a young kid. And it's kind of giving me the life where I get to be around for my sons and kind of get to go on these adventures and, just kind of enjoy it.
Awesome. Do you ever have vegetarians come out with you and they have to, take down a moose?
Yeah. I mean, I've had plenty of vegans and vegetarians, and I mean, I was a vegan for about 2 years. My buddy dared me, and then I was like, if somebody dares me, sometimes I'm like, all right, I'll do it. So I did it, and then I was like, this is actually a really important thing to learn, to know what my body goes through when I don't take in animal proteins and I don't have that consistent food, because it's just like everybody going on the carnivore diet and this whole fad of only eating meats. Keep in mind, the meats they're eating come wrapped in plastics. But my point is, if you're going to eat that way, you should also eat the opposite way, so you understand how your body works. And that's really, for me, it turned into a very beautiful thing, because as I removed an entire, option of food off the table, I had to redirect my focus to plants and tubers. And it just forced me to learn this huge, massive, food cache that exists out in the natural environment that I could consume. So by my own choice, not eating any meats forced me to learn a lot of, natural foods and natural medicines. And, at a certain point I was like, all right, now it's time to eat meat and go about that process. But I mean, there's always something out there. It's way easier to eat a hand of berries or some roots or tubers than it is to go out and try and shoot a moose or even a squirrel in a tree. It's,
right.
To take game with some sort of weapon or an atlatl, a bow or stone sling requires a lot of crafting and, expenditure of calories to get more calories. However, you can reach down, if you know proper mushrooms and plant ID, you can definitely make a meal. It's not going to be the best meal, as I would say, over time, but,
right.
This recent trip to the Chihuahua, it was rats and mice and cactus pads.
And that's what you ate. Yeah.
Yep.
Rats. That's awful.
Yeah.
But I guess protein is protein when you're in the bush.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time I ate a rat or, a mouse or something completely gross, but, you burn the hair off.
And well, that's what I got to ask you. So what do you do? You burn the hair off, like you rotisserie it on a stick, like it's.
Yeah. If it's a small mouse like that big, I just kind of open it up, pull the guts out, stick it on a stick, hold it over the fire. And then, if you caught it in like a deadfall trap that crushed it, all the bones are kind of broken up. But if it's not, let's just say you caught it in your hand, I'd kind of break the bones up with a rock. And then I hold it over fire, burn the hair off.
You mash it up a little, you tenderize it.
Mash it up, tenderize it, hold it back over the fire, make sure it's good to go, and pop it in and eat it.
And there you go. Wow, that's amazing. So, you that's so fucking gross.
I know.
But
I know. It was why I was single for so long.
Yeah, but back to survival. This is what it's about, right? I mean, this is what we're doing here, which is we're looking to survive. What about squirrels? Have you eaten squirrels, and what do squirrels taste like?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be honest. I've eaten so many things where it's just now when somebody asks, like, what does a squirrel taste like? I'm like, well, it tastes like chicken. A squirrel, not even remotely close to chicken. I think, depending on the squirrel in this season, once you get them really big and fat, right when they're moving into winter, I mean, they're delicious. It's a little gamey, but it's a nice clean meat. Pull the hide off the guts, roast it over, a fire. I mean, I was in the Amazon last year. I made a bow with a really long arrow forked at it, and I shot an electric eel, like a 6-foot electric eel, cut it up, roasted it over a fire, and sat there in the middle of the jungle, ate that. I mean, there isn't anything I won't eat. It's just, if I have the option of getting something that's a little bit easier, like I like to tell people, the fish first mentality is really your best. Fish, they're in large numbers, they're relatively condensed depending where you're fishing. Sometimes you can see them, you can scare them, and they'll kind of come back to that area.
Right.
And they give you
a nets.
They give you a pattern of what they're doing. And then once you interject yourself into that pattern, you have, potentially a pretty simple meal. More importantly, some fish species you can eat raw. So you can just gut it out and start chomping down on it.
Yeah. So the trick to all of this is knowing, right? And that's what you're teaching, which is like, hey, this is the fish you could eat, these plants. Talk to me about plants and stuff. So is there any easy sort of visual things that one could pay attention to, which is like, these are dangerous or poisonous plants, i.e. poison ivy, I think has like a yellow dot on it.
It's kind of got, there's a whole variety of poisonous plants. And what I tell people to do is they should really focus on 8 plants a year. And I call it your straight 8. So 3 plants that are food, 3 plants that are medicine, and then 2 plants that are used for tools, like a poison, a glue, some sort of binding or lashing, something to that extent. And if you study those plants, those 8 plants for 1 full year, so spring, summer, fall, and winter, you understand the full life cycle of that plant. And then you really get into good plant ID. You know where it grows, how it grows, why it's growing in certain areas. And a lot of the plants that we typically deem, unedible or we wouldn't think to eat are typically weeds. Like you have a lot of docks. Dandelions is like one of those weeds. Purslane is a weed.
Yeah.
You have all these different, like stinging nettle, right? You ever heard of stinging nettle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more nutritious than spinach, but it has these little stingers on it, these little hairs. And if you touch it, you'll get a rash. But that same plant that will give you that rash is also the same plant that will remove that rash. You can pull the leaf off, roll it up in your fingers, pop it in your mouth like spinach, and it's 100%, edible. A lot of plants you can eat raw. Maybe give them a wash. Look out for some sort of bird excrement or animal excrement. But there's a lot of plants out there, and I think if people are looking to get out into the outdoors and really kind of experience it, whether they're the weekend warrior or someone that spends a lot of time in the bush, I recommend getting a plant ID book for your area and then going out with your kids or your significant other, and you kind of have a treasure hunt. All right, we're looking for this plant. This is what it looks like. This is what it smells like. This is how high it grows. And then you're out there on this family event, and next thing you know, kids are like, I think I found it. And you walk over, and then you kind of teach them. You run through that process. All right, the plant we're looking for has these 6 things. Does it have this? Yes, yes, yes. No. All right, well, this might not be it. What are some other ways? It's problem solving. Kids are getting into it. They're getting curious. And next thing you know, you find yourself purposely going out harvesting plants because they're medicinal in value, or they work well for, glues and adhesives. There's a lichen called old man's beard, or usnea. And for years, I've collected usnea with my sons in the mountains. We grab about 2 lunch sacks full of usnea, and it just grows off of trees. And then we'll go home, we'll clean it all off, pull off little pieces of wood, stick it in a bottle, pour like 70 proof vodka on it, and you make a tincture. And then you can extract that usnea tincture. It's great for colds. It's great for, flu-like symptoms. When, the COVID thing was going around and I thought I had it, I took usnea, and within I would say maybe 48 to 72 hours, not an issue, no temperature, nothing. And that's just, it's in my place now, but it's just going out and seeing and what it is and what you can learn from it and what can it do, because a lot of the plants that exist, most of our natural medicines come from that, like willow bark aspirin, the salicylate and willow bark. That's a great aspirin. I give that to clients all the time. We're out at 10,000 feet. They got a headache. I know they're a little dehydrated. We make a little willow bark tea up. I'm rehydrating them, and I'm giving them a little bit of that salicylate to kind of impact that, that headache or sore muscles, whatever the case.
And can you just chew on the bark as well? Or do you need to brew it into tea?
You can. If you chew on it with the bark, it's going to work, but you're not going to get the proper dosage. So what I like to do is I like to formulate it into a tea where I can really extract it through boiling. So water boils at 212 degrees. I know once I'm above 212 and I've got that rapid boil, it's really impacting that bark and really extracting everything. Let it kind of come down to a cool and drink it down. I usually tell people if they're, out in the bush and they believe they've got a headache or one's coming on, it doesn't hurt to grab one and kind of chew on it for a second, because you get more of a placebo effect. But a good piece of willow is really the best toothbrush, if you will. You can kind of chew on the end, it flares out, and scrub your teeth with it.
Cool. Super cool. Yeah. Super cool. More about plants medicine. Some top 3, top ones. So you just talked about one which was great for headaches and rehydrating and boiling tea.
Mullein.
Okay.
Yeah, great mullein, or the mullein. It's one of those plants that most people see it, they don't know the name of it. It's a tall plant. It can grow up to 4 or 5 feet, yellow flowers on the top, kind of a soft stalk with these really soft leaves on the bottom. And those leaves are great for toilet paper if you need one, as well as you dry those leaves out. It really can help break up sort of mucus and congestion and all these sort of chest related issues. A mullein tea or a mullein pull smoke, it kind of sounds counterproductive to smoke the mullein, but if you get some dried mullein, you light it up and you get it smoking, and you pull it into you, kind of smoke it that way. It can help kind of break up some of that chest mucus, things to that extent. And then there's a plant called yarrow, and it's pretty recognizable. White flower, kind of fern-like leaves, relatively small, but that will kill everything in the body. It's like my number one plant if you have some sort of indigestion, or you've got the runs, or you're just not feeling well, stomach sort of thing. It works really great on the internals and can be worked into a tea, the flowers as well as the leaves. And before you know it, 2, 3, 4, cups of tea over a couple hours of time, you'll be doing pretty well.
Cool. When was the last time you took a Tylenol or an Advil?
Oh man, I mean, I'll
Never.
take one. If it's there, I mean, I'm that guy where if it's like 2 environments, right? So when I have my sons, it's dad mode. I got to bring them to school. We're engaged in very much each other's lives, and when I don't have them, I'm kind of out of my own. So based on the environments, I'll do it. But I mean, I don't wash my hair all that much. That's why I like to say it's why I have hair, because I haven't washed it too much.
It with all that chemicals, right?
Yeah, no, I use this all natural sort of foo-foo sort of stuff, no chemicals. And sometimes it's just water, rinsing it out and giving it a scrub, and keep it simple.
Funny that you said that. So I told you I now live in Costa Rica, and the water in Costa Rica, the minerals there is just, it's like heavy, heavy, heavy minerals.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to sound, but like you come from North America and like you get in this habit of like, washing and conditioning your hair every day. And it strips the natural oils out of your hair. Anyway, just being in Costa Rica, for whatever reason, I stopped washing my hair. When I say stop washing, like maybe once, like if you're in the ocean and it's filthy and like you need to give it a clean go for it. But besides that, just water. And I've noticed my hair has gotten thicker. And it's got more volume. No. I do the same thing. If my hair is dirty, it's the same thing like you wash your hands. If your hands are dirty, you wash them. If my hair is dirty because I've been out in the bush or I've been grinding, some sort of antler or wood, and I've got all that stuff in my hair, I'll give it one of these. But the idea is to clean the hair, not to just remove all of the natural sort of stuff, if you will, from it. So I rinse it down pretty much once a week and kind of roll with that. I mean, I think I've had the same shampoo bottle for probably 3 months now. It's not a lot, and my hair is long, and I'm 43 and flowing and by the way, for the audience that might be listening to this through an audio versus watching on YouTube, Donny's got long flowing hair like what was that romance novel with was it Fabio? Right? Look, you're a little more wilderness looking, but definitely long hair. So maybe there's rhyme to reason with this, washing the hairless. All right. So I want to switch gears for a little bit and back to prepping. Yeah. I have been by definition a prepper. Some of my friends think I'm fucking crazy. Go bag, having, in Canada, I put a generator on my house. And the reason I did it was because we live in such a cold climate that if power did go, and there was an ice storm many years ago, man, having that generator is huge. So
for sure.
How important, so I'm going to start with the first question and then I'm going to build. How important is it for people to have that prepping mentality? And maybe not from an extreme standpoint, but, it's, how important is it in your mind?
I think it's extremely important. And when you let's say we go back 100 years to like the early 1920s and 30s, everybody was a prepper, not because they were preppers. It was just their way of life, conserving meats and root cellars and canning food. That was a way of life. And we've kind of lost it. So I personally believe that people should be prepared. You should be able to support yourself over a period of time, as well as support your community, maybe your neighbors on your left or right, or whoever's behind you. And you should know how to do these things. I remember doing, a podcast before the epidemic. And one of the questions was, how important is it to be prepared for, everything and anything? I said, well, most people should be prepared for like medical emergencies, first aid, suturing up a wound, anything like that, because those sort of things bring you out of the house. They require you, if you don't know what you're doing, to go to a hospital or go to a doctor's office. So if I can do those things at home, awesome. And then if I've got a cache of food and water and energy and a surplus, if you will, I don't need to leave if this is where I'm going to be. But, you can prepare for the ultimate extreme, some sort of, asteroid or a super volcano. But I live in Colorado, you live in Canada, where it gets cold, and in Costa Rica, hurricanes, typhoons. The natural disasters are probably going to be some of those biggest threats. the place I lived in before up here near Boulder was we had fires come through, and you got to leave the house. You got to grab your stuff and you got to go. Now, during that time, I had some prepared, packs and clothing and different stuff where we just had to leave the house and go to another location, but we were still prepared. And for me, it's like, all right, if we get hit with a snowstorm, I just want to have those necessary resources on the inside, whether it's, an extra bag of rice or whatever the case may be, because that makes sense. Why would I not want to have those sort of things?
Right.
So I'm all for it. Yeah, I think people should find that comfort level and how prepared they are and kind of strategize in their brain. All right, if we live super remote, what is the likelihood of X, Y, and Z happening? If we live in a city, what is the probability of something happening where we got to leave the city? And then they prepare for that kind of contingency, if you will.
I think it's scarier to live in a big city from a prepping standpoint versus out remote, right? I think, people in panic and stress, will revert to the most primitive selves. And do you ever watch the show Walking Dead?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, where like it was one camp trying to kill the other camp, right? Yeah. Because it's just this mentality, right? So, and I was chatting with a buddy the other day, actually yesterday, and coincidentally we were talking about it. He was like, "Look, if things go wrong, some of the worst cities to be in are New York, Toronto, LA, like the big metropolitan cities, because people are not prepared. We're extremely reliant on resources." So I guess, would you agree with that? I'm assuming yes. But, coming back and, I got to credit Rob Works when he does all the video production. He was asking the question, which is like, how important is it to, as a prepper, do this with your neighbors and have a community and have a camp versus doing it by yourself? Or is it 60 or half a dozen there? Does it matter? Is one better than the other?
Yeah. I think if you're in any one of those major cities, you definitely pose a large risk because, having seen it kind of firsthand and overseas in these sort of extreme situations, families will go to great extremes to make sure that their, son or their daughter or their elderly parents has clean water, some food, and a little bit of, medical attention if that's what they need. I would go to those extremes if I was in that case. I think most people would. So knowing that, that's just the location I don't want to be in because I don't want to be a potential target to somebody else. So when a lot of people advertise their big preps and they're doing this and they're doing that, that'd be the second thing I would never do. I would never let anybody know the stuff that I have because I don't want to be put on a menu as we're going to go to his place, or this place.
Right.
If it's in that community, those people that whether it's your neighbors or your block or just an overall little community, I think it's important to rely on one another because everybody can have a different kind of offering, if you will. There might be somebody with medical experience. There could be somebody that's really good with firearms, knows how to fix them. Somebody that's good with electrical work and fixing solar panels. There's a lot of different things that people can provide. So when people talk about prepping, it's not only just prepping food and water and all this sort of stuff, because if I know where it is, I'm going to come get it. I'll be 100% honest. And there's good, but there's truth to that. There could be 7 or 8 people that are like, I know where they've got a lot of stuff. Every time they open their garage door, I see all their stuff. That's where I'm going. Yeah. So for me, it's kind of prepping to the most likely thing that could potentially happen in a given area. If it was all to go down, I'm going to go to the place where I know there's nobody, and the place where I know most people are going to feel the most uncomfortable. And I'm just going to go out in the mountains. I have plenty of caves that I've lived in and slept in many a nights. Some of those caves have, resources in and around them, from springs to fish to plenty of game. I'm going to go to one of those, and that's where I'm going to go. I mean, I'll grab a simple amount of clothes and basic amenities from home, and I'm taking off. I'll grab my boys and we're gone.
Yeah. I love what you said there, which is, and I'll just paraphrase it, which is, if you live in a community of like-minded individuals that think alike and are willing to operate from a prepping standpoint, it's a good idea to do this as a community. If you live in a community where you're the only prepper, right, and shit goes wrong, people now all of a sudden say, hey, wait, Greg's house, I see his shelving units in the garage. He's got rice, he's got cans, he's got all of this. I now become a target. And, being able to get yourself out into the mountains is important. I got a buddy who very close friend, the same guy I was chatting with yesterday. In fact, I should send him this podcast afterwards. He moved to Montana, and he moved to a 40-acre property with water, mountains, everything.
Yeah.
And his whole position is like, I need to be in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. Because, now also the community that he lives in, all like-minded individuals, and they got the firearms guy, and they got the medical guy, and they got the community. So they've really bound together and packed together. And I think it's important, right? Man, super, super, super interesting. So next question is like, go bag. I mean, it's or from a prepping standpoint, what are some of the fundamentals? Firearm, medical. You mentioned things like rice and stuff like that. What else would you throw in there?
I think if you have a go bag, your go bag should be environmental and extended for a period of time. Meaning that go bag gives me the immediate resources that I would need. So whether it's cash, it's food, anything to that extent where I can improve upon my situations. If I have to evacuate my house because of a fire, I want to grab this stuff and then be able to go find a hotel or a campsite or whatever those things could be where I can stay for a period of time. So a lot of people have this mentality. They're going to put on their cargo pants and their vest and strap in and all this sort of stuff. I wouldn't do that. No way. Because even in that sort of disaster sort of scenario, you're going to be the one, if there's any sort of local authorities or even let's say if a militia takes over, you're going to be the one they're going to target. Me, I would look approachable. I would want to be, so if I do have to flag a vehicle down, I'm not going to be carrying a machete and a long
Geared
sword.
Up, yeah.
I'm probably going to have a pair of pants on, maybe not a button-down shirt, but a flannel, and look presentable so somebody could potentially help me out if I had to go that route. So it's all about what you present and what you're going to not advertise to potentially anybody that could be an adversary. So if I see people with a giant backpack on their back and I'm looking to take advantage of that, well, I've got, potential prey, if you will, right there. So I would go as minimal as possible, and it would be in line with where I'm wanting to go. So if I know that my end state is a mountain cabin or a remote tract of land that a buddy of mine owns that I'm cleared hot to go to, I'm going to have this stuff that's going to allow me to get there. So it's lightweight, it's low impact, very discreet, and it's not going to be something where I'm going to look like a potential threat to any sort of entity that could be patrolling in the area. I'm just going to look like a person that might be wandering around, and I'm avoiding sort of different areas. When people like to, it's a little military thing, but people like to have a show of force. They like to say, look how tough I am with all this sort of stuff. And I know firsthand that that's just a show, because there's always somebody bigger and badder that's going to be like, well, I'm going to take it away from you, and we'll see how your day progresses. Now, this day and age, people are prepared. They know, whether it's, jujitsu, or they know how to handle their firearms, to have a little bit more situational awareness. But I think in the large scale, as people kind of throw those packs on their back and say, I'm just going to take off, might not always be the case. How do you travel at night? What, are you using natural waterways to help in your navigation as an arm rail? Are you traveling main roads? Are there considerable checkpoints that can be put? There's a lot of different things. So my go bag is to get me where I need to go, to remove myself from the threat. And then at that location is where I have a surplus, more things that I could potentially utilize from there.
Yeah. So you just said something, which is, in part of your prepping, besides having a go bag, having your locational stops where you can replenish,
Absolutely.
and knowing where you go. You can't just run out your house and go barreling down the street to then figure out, where am I going? There's got to be some sort of plan. You said something, and there's an interesting study which says, when a predator and prey. So when will a person be attacked in the street? And it's usually the individual that looks small and weak, and they look a little more timid, and their body language is a little more closed, and they're talking like in cities and stuff, and subways, and what could you do to increase your chances of not being attacked or mugged or whatnot in some of these cities is walking with confidence and standing up tall and walking intentionally with purpose and stuff. And I think what you were just saying is you got to be a little conscious about that in this type of situation, because
Yeah.
this now the opposite applies, which it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe he's got stuff that we want to go and take.
Yeah. When you over advertise, it's about capabilities and limitations. When you over advertise potential capabilities, because you've got this, beautiful M4 and this med kit and this pack and all this sort of stuff, that person might be willing to stand and fight for it. But it just lets me know, maybe as I'm observing from a distance, or I've gained that, intel from somebody else, that they could have more stuff. There could be a whole bunch of things that they have that I potentially want, or somebody else could potentially want. So, you play it smart. And this is going back into like my counter intel days, but the idea is to deny, detect, and deceive. If I know something and I don't want anybody to find that out, I'm going to deny them information. I'm going to detect those that are trying to find it. And then if I think they found it out, I'm going to deceive them through some sort of surreptitious means. So I believe when it comes to prepping, you should be prepared for, natural disasters and, that emergency sort of situation, medical, food, water, power outages. But when it comes down to like that, shit hit the fan sort of scenario, hopefully nobody has already identified me as a potential resource. That community that I'm in can really rely on one another, and we can kind of do our thing. And if it's not going, plan, which most things typically don't, you won't find me sitting in a house. I will be gone, and I will go to this area up in the mountains that nobody will ever find me or my son's at, and we'll go. We'll be like Red Dawn. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. As you're talking about like the dude walking down with the vest and the medical kit and the gun and the machete and stuff, it reminds me of like the person that just started riding motorcycles versus the Hells Angels.
Bingo.
That you get the brand new leathers, brand new shiny, like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 Harley. And they're not a rider.
Exactly.
They've just gotten their motorcycle license, right? Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Donny, this is awesome, brother.
Right on.
Let me ask you and for the audience, if people were interested in if people were interested in getting your books around how to survive and stuff like that, and potentially participating within some of your programming, where can they find out more information about that?
Yeah, anybody that's listening can go to donnydust.com. That's just kind of an info site on me. There's some links to social media where you can pick up my books, some of the TV shows and films that I've been, part of and been in. It's just kind of like the information portal of everything that you could come across. And then my, wilderness self-reliance school is called Paleo Track Survival. So you can go to paleotracksurvival.com, and there's information there. You can see how we go about signing up for classes. I don't actually offer calendar courses. I like an email from each person where we can kind of start that dialogue and really engage each other on a human level and see what I can do to answer some of your, outdoor concerns or questions. And more importantly, if I'm not that person for you, I know plenty of people in this community that I can redirect you, to if you're in a different geographic region. But yeah, paleotracksurvival.com.
Amazing. I'm going to get a couple buddies. I'm going to come and you're going to take us out. We're going to go into the wilderness and
let's do it. That sounds like a great time.
I would love to do it, man. I really, really, really would. So I'll reach out afterwards and stuff. That's awesome.
For sure.
And for the audience, we're going to put all the links and everything in the show notes, and we'll make sure that information is accessible. Quickly, what were some of the TV shows and movies that you were part of?
Yeah. So I had my own TV show called Mud, Sweat, and Beards, where, that's, cool. I think it's on like Hulu right now. And it was me and this other guy. We went and built shelters and, trapped animals and shot different things and lived out in the woods. I was on a show called Alone the Beast, where I lived in a swamp for 30 days. Wow. I did a show with Cardi B, where I took her out into the woods and showed her how to make a fire and do all that sort of stuff.
What was she like?
She was very down to earth. Like when the cameras weren't rolling, she was very much, she knew who I was and, knew my kid's name, just a normal person. And then, the cameras come on and everyone kind of TVs up a little bit, but she was very friendly, very kind to me. And I have to say, like, I usually don't judge anybody until I actually get that, that interpersonal kind of human dynamic with someone. And she was really nice, really, really nice.
Very cool.
Yeah. Very so cool. There's more out there. Just go to donnydust.com. You can check it all out and kind of see what's up.
Amazing. At the end of the episode, we come to the most important question, which is, what do you think we could all do to be better humans tomorrow?
Yeah, what I think we could all do to become better humans tomorrow is stop listening to everybody else and just listen to yourself. Like, you know what right is, you know what feels, positive in your life. You know what things will bring you happiness and bring you joy, even if it's the process of discovering those things. You know what feels right. You know what that value is. And I think if we start to kind of listen to ourselves and do the things that make us happy, we will ultimately become a much better human being. And that better human will greatly impact everybody that's in and around them.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Right on.
What a great answer. Donny, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Thanks for today.
Thank you.
To the audience, you got to go check this dude out. He's a beast. He's a legend. You got to go check out his website. Follow him. I've got you. I've just added you on Insta. So
right on.
We'll keep in touch there as well.
Right.
And once again, to the audience, if you like today's episode, which I'm sure you did, like it, share it, and subscribe. Support Donny in his world as well. Check out his books. And if you're interested in going and learning how to be a super survivor in the wilderness, this is probably the dude that you want to go check out. Donny, thanks so much, man.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the bush soon, right?
We'll see you in the bush. All right, audience, we will catch you next time, next week. Stay happy, stay healthy.